But without government, who would build the roads? The question has become somewhat of a joke in libertarian and voluntarist circles. It teases out the unfortunate reality that many people have never given any serious thought as to how society would do anything if it wasn't being done the way that it is currently being done. The reality is that there were roads before government, and frankly, the government hasn't been doing a very good job of maintaining the roads. And to help us better understand who will build the roads and how, we have a gentleman who has quite literally written the book on who will build the roads, Dr. Walter Block. Dr. Block is an economist and the former Harold E. Wirth Eminent Scholar Endowed Chair in Economics at the School of Business at Loyola University in New Orleans, and a former senior fellow at the nonprofit think tank, the Ludwig von Mises Institute. The author of over 24 books, the one that is most pertinent today is The Privatization of Roads and Highways, Human and Economic Factors. I'm pleased to give you Dr. Walter Block.
Thanks for your kind introduction, Howard. You used the word former twice. One time it was correct, the other time it wasn't correct. I'm not the former endowed chair at the Loyola University. I'm the present one. But I am the former senior fellow at the Mises Institute. I've been booted out of that. I'm no longer associated with them. We had a little dispute over Israel. Okay, I'm happy to address your audience on who would build the roads and how would the roads work and stuff like that. My motto on all privatization, whether it's roads or highways or oceans or rivers or space, is if it moves, privatize it. If it doesn't move, privatize it. And since everything either moves or doesn't move, you privatize everything. Should I hit OK for this meeting is being recorded? I guess I
Sure.
better. OK. Was my brilliant statement, opening statement, recorded?
Yeah, you're rolling.
Okay. So what's the case for privatizing anything? Well, there are two cases for privatizing anything. One is more efficiency. If it's private and you do a good job, you can expand your base of operation and satisfy more customers. If you don't do a good job, you lose profits. And if you lose profits once too often, you have to go broke. You go bankrupt. And if you go bankrupt, then you have to go do something else. So that's why we have pretty good, I don't know what, pretty good pens and pretty good, I don't know, books like this and pretty good shirts and pretty good everything that's private. Not perfect because human beings are the mistake-making animals and we always make mistakes. But things are pretty good in the private sector because of this weeding out of the inefficiency. Well, what's the other reason for privatization? Well, there are only three possibilities. One is privatization, the other is government ownership, and the third is non-ownership or the tragedy of the commons. The idea is if everybody owns it, nobody really owns it, and nobody really takes care of it, we're going to run out of fish and run out of whales because nobody owns the fish in the ocean. So non-ownership or common ownership is a problem. Government ownership from an ethical point of view is highly problematic because the government is a coercive institution and libertarians are against coercion. We favor voluntary interaction, not coercion, and the government is coercion personified. So that leaves as the only legitimate ethical institution would be private ownership. And it's easy to see why we should privatize the post office. It's easy to see why we should privatize sanitation. It's not so easy to see why we should privatize highways and roads and streets. And that's what I'm going to be talking about now. So, what's the argument in favor of privatization? My main argument in privatization, in behalf of privatization of roads and highways and streets, is right now about 40,000 people die every year on the roads. 40,000 people, that's a lot of people. To put this in context, only 3,000 people died in 9/11 in New York City. In Katrina, in New Orleans, where I am now, only 1,900 people died. We're talking 40,000, and not only 40,000 deaths, but maybe several hundred thousand of very serious injuries on highways. Another context would be what's happening in Gaza right now, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, namely Hamas. Over 40,000 people have died, and everyone says that, my God, this is horrible. Well, it is horrible. Whenever 40,000 people die, that's horrible. But it happens every year in the U.S. Hopefully, this will only happen one year in the Middle East, and they'll have peace in the Middle East eventually. But if the future resembles the past, the U.S. will suffer 40,000 deaths every year from the highways. And that's horrible. You know, they say, what is it? There's only two things that are inevitable, death and taxes. Well, nobody gets out of this alive, so I'm willing to go along with death as inevitable. I don't go along with taxes as inevitable. And I certainly don't go along with 40,000 people dying on the highways. Why are there 40,000 people dying on the highways? Well, because we have monopoly. We don't have competition. Again, we have pretty good, I don't know, pens and pretty good scissors and pretty good shirts and pretty good paper clips and pretty good everything else because of competition. But we don't have that in highways. Suppose, I don't know, I-10, which is the highway that runs through New Orleans. It goes all the way from Florida to California. Suppose the owners of I-10 don't do a good job. Well, if it's private, then they'll have to be a new owner because they'll lose money and there'll be a hostile takeover. No such thing as a hostile takeover, but I don't want to get into that. It's a different issue. As with anything, I mean, look, right now, McDonald's killed one person and I think injured 45. Well, McDonald's is too powerful, too much of a colossus. And, you know, they sell, I don't know how many burgers, millions, billions, zillions. So they'll survive. But if they do it once too often, I mean, if they killed 40,000 people, there'd be no more McDonald's. We'd go to Burger King, we'd go to Wendy's or whatever. So that's one argument in favor of privatization, or that's one of my motivations. The other motivation is traffic congestion. In most cities, certainly New Orleans, where I now live, New York City, where I used to live, Seattle, where I visit often, California, many cities, the average traffic moves slower than a bicycle, maybe even slower than a runner. A runner can do, I don't know, 12 miles an hour, something like that. Even a walker who can do, I don't know, 20-minute miles. Sometimes it's just bumper to bumper. The Long Island Expressway is known as the longest, what is it, parking lot in the world. It's about 100 miles long, and sometimes you just sit there. What's that? That's crazy. That's nonsense. Well, what that is really is, well, let me illustrate that. Let me see if I can call up a screen here. There's a whiteboard. And what traffic congestion really is here is quantity, and here is price, and here is a demand curve, and here is a supply curve, and supply and demand. And what is the price that you have to pay when you get onto the Long Island Expressway or Highway 10 or Highway 5 or Highway 95? Zero. You don't have to pay anything. You already paid. You paid through taxes. You paid through income taxes. You paid through gasoline taxes. You've already paid. So to get on the highway, it costs you no more So what we have now is a curve like this, and the distance between the amount supplied and the amount demanded is called a shortage. That's all a what do you call it? A traffic jam is a shortage, and this is basic supply and demand analysis. And um, uh, whoa, I don't want to leave the meeting. I want to leave the whiteboard. Whoops. No, I don't want that either. I think I want to leave the like. Whoops. Sorry, I'm not really good at this sort of stuff. Okay, I got rid of the whiteboard. I don't need the whiteboard now. Okay, so those are my two main motivations. Major motivation is 40,000 people die. Probably nobody listening to this uh, doesn't know somebody who knows somebody who either died on the highway or got injured on the highway. It's a scourge. And yet, there's nothing in the news about this. I mean, okay, we just had an election, so you wouldn't expect this to be on the news, but it's never on the news. And yet, if 40,000 people died, I mean, when they died in Katrina or 9/11, it was on the news. It's just wiped away. Okay. How might private ownership of roads do better? Well, right now, on the highways, there's a minimum of 40 miles an hour and a maximum of 70 miles an hour. And everybody has to do at least 40. And if you can't do 40, you shouldn't be on the highway. They'll give you a ticket. And if you go over 70, they'll give you a ticket. They never do. I mean, they let you do to 75, 80. And if the road is clear, maybe 82. It depends upon what side of the bed the cops got out on, whether they'll give you a ticket. But if you're driving at 70 miles in the left lane, there are going to be cars going right past you in the middle lane and hooting at you. And if it's at night, they're going to be doing the high beam against you to tell you that you're a clod, you're an idiot, you're a moron, get out of the left lane. That's the rule. Now, every once in a while, they'll say slow cars go to the right, but they never give you a ticket. You can do 65 in the left lane and they will not give you a ticket. Or very rarely will they give you. I've never seen it, and that's my experience, and I'm an average road user. Okay, how about let me get the screen back up again and ask you people a question. And here are three lanes. There's the left lane, there's the middle lane, and there's the right lane. And I'm thinking I'll own a road and I'll tell everyone that they have to do 60 miles an hour here. 60. My handwriting isn't that good. You have to work with me. And everyone has to do 70 here. And everyone has to do 80 here. No deviation, no 75, no 65, no odd numbers. The question is, will this save lives? And the answer is, we don't know. We don't know whether this will save lives. And we certainly don't know whether this will save lives. Maybe 55, and that's a 55. You have to work with me here. This is a 70, and let's say this is an 85. Maybe that will save lives. I don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows. I mean, that's the problem. You can make shirts in a different way. You can make scissors in a different way. You can make pens in a different way. You can make pencils any way you want. Here's a rabbit. Don't ask me how I got a rabbit, but here's a rabbit. And people who make rabbits can make rabbits in any way they damn well please. And some ways of making rabbits will do better, and some ways of making rabbits will do worse. And we'll learn how to make rabbits. But no, on the highways, we're not learning how to make rabbits. Sorry. We're not learning how to make highways or make highways safe because Washington, D.C. says that the minimum of 40, maximum of 70. That's one way that possibly we could save highways. Let me try a different way. Let me get a new whiteboard. And again, we have three lanes, left lane, middle lane, and right lane. And suppose in the left lane, we said that anyone passing you on anyone passing you in the middle lane, here's the middle lane. Sorry, that's my M. Looks more like a W. Um, you give this guy a ticket. Would that work? Well, I don't know. Nobody knows. My theory is that the more lane switching, the more deaths we have. And the idea that everybody has to do a certain speed in each lane, there'd be much, much less lane shifting. Now, I don't know if it's true. I'm not a road expert. What do I know about roads? Now, there are people who are road experts and they go to school and become road engineers and stuff. Unfortunately, in those schools, they don't teach anything about private roads and alternative ways of doing things. But I posit, I think, I hypothesize that lane changing is dangerous. Now, obviously, you have to have some lane changing, but if you minimize lane changing, maybe we'll save deaths. I don't know. But the problem is nobody knows, and our system is not conducive to allowing anyone to know. Let me try another screen. And now I'm going to use a two-lane highway, or rather a highway that has only two lanes going in the same direction. And here is a truck, and here is another truck. And sorry, I'm trying to draw a rectangle, and it didn't come out right. But I'm not drunk. I'm just, I'm not good at this sort of thing. And I tell you, when I see one truck in front of the other like that, I know that this truck is going to come around and it's going to try to pass the other truck. And it's going to take 15 miles for him to go past the other truck, and they're going to sort of have a race. And you know what I do? I hate to admit this, and I hope no police are listening. What I'll do is I'll step on the gas and I'll try to pass these trucks before they block me in. Which is very dangerous. I shouldn't be going past the speed limit or much past the speed limit to avoid trucks. Well, maybe what we should do is give this truck, the slower truck, a ticket for not letting this guy pass him or something. I'm not sure exactly what to do, but that's another problem that I see on the highways. And I've never seen any cop give any truck a ticket for not allowing a faster truck to pass him. So these are some ways of saving lives, or possibly saving lives. The first half of my book discusses many, many more. The second half deals with a whole bunch of objections, which I'll get to. Another one is whenever there are a lot of deaths, what I would do on my highway, the Walter Highway, is I would put up, I don't know, a cross for a Christian death or a Jewish star or a Muhammad emblem, and I would make it 50 feet high or maybe 100 feet high to indicate that, this part of the road is sort of dangerous. Maybe the road tilts or who knows why. That would be another way to try to reduce deaths, to scare people. Okay, it's not nice, but I'm trying to reduce deaths here, and I'm speculating as to how we can do this in a competitive situation. One objection so as I say, the first half of my book is why we should privatize roads to save 40,000 people in congestion. How would private ownership possibly reduce deaths? And I've given you a little taste of that. And then the second half, or maybe the second 2/3 of the book, I haven't counted recently, I forget, is objections. So let me go over a few objections that people have made to the idea of privatizing roads. Besides saying that I'm drunk or something like that. Oh, by the way, on drunken driving, maybe they should be a little bit more serious about punishing drunken drivers. Take away their car, put them in jail, and not just give them a little bit of a fine. Now, there are some people who say, well, just being drunk is not per se a crime. If you're a libertarian, what are you going to do? Bring back a prohibition of alcohol? No, no, no. If it's a private road and I make the rules of the private road and I say, look, you get on my road and you're drunk or drugged or whatever it is, I'm going to kick your butt. That's not a rights violation. Look, if I say, if you come to my living room, you have to wear a propeller beanie and you refuse to wear a propeller beanie, you're violating my rights. So I think that yet another way of reducing deaths is to deal much more harshly with drugged or drunken drivers. Okay, now for a few objections. One objection is that the deaths are not due to government, but to drunken driving, speed, vehicle malfunction, texting, driver error. There's this guy, Sam Peltzman, who I revere for his work on the FDA, privatized the FDA, great, a good free market economist. But he comes up with, what is it, 25 different causes of road deaths. And he never mentions privatization. He never mentions government ownership. And then there's the NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and they have 125 causes of deaths. 125. I mean, you have to be very meticulous about your causes. For example, if there's a hood ornament on the front of the car, it's more dangerous. Another one would be how far is the hospital from the road? On the idea that the closer the hospital is to the road, the fewer the deaths. Okay, that's a good point. And if you're going to try to list 125, you gotta use great detail. Another one would be, does the hospital have a helicopter? If the hospital has a helicopter and there's a death, they can bring, not a death, but a serious injury, they can bring the injured person to the hospital much more quickly than with an ambulance. A road ambulance. And so they get 125 different causes of highway deaths, and they never mention they never mention government ownership. I mean, what's with that? So that's one objection. Another one is proximate cause versus ultimate cause. Yes, I'm now going to shoot Howard. He's my, don't get scared. I'm not really going to shoot you. And the bullet hits him, and now the cops come and haul me away as a murderer. I say, tut tut tut, I'm not the murderer. The bullet killed him. Well, nobody's going to swallow that for a second. I'm the ultimate cause. So yes, the government is not the ultimate, not the proximate cause of deaths. It might be speeding or driver error, all these 125 different causes. Those are the proximate cause, but the ultimate cause, as in the murder, is me, not the bullet. And the ultimate cause of the traffic fatalities is the government, not these other 125 causes. Okay. Another objection is, well, if we had one of the estimates that I do in the book is I say, well, how many deaths would there be if it was privatized? And my speculation is that there would be 10,000 deaths. Look, private enterprise is not perfect. There'd still be deaths, even if private enterprise owned all the roads. But the idea is to minimize deaths, and zero is the optimal number, 0 deaths. But the problem with 0 deaths is the only way to get 0 deaths is to have a speed limit of about 15 miles an hour. And if you had a speed limit of 15 miles an hour, there'd be no highway fatalities. But a lot of people would die because the trucks can't get through to deliver food, and we'd all starve. So the optimal number of deaths might not even be 0. If you look at from a macro point of view. But you have to distinguish between the ultimate and the proximate cause. And so my estimate is 10,000 deaths. Well, would we then blame capitalists for these deaths? No. Highway travel at normal speeds, 50, 70, 90 miles an hour, is a dangerous thing. So so then the objection is, well, if 10,000 deaths would occur, and right now 40,000 deaths occur, then I am being overly critical of government. The government is not responsible for 40,000 deaths. It's only responsible for 30,000 deaths. You get the idea? This is an objection to my theory that the government is responsible for 40,000, and I admit concede that 10,000 people will die. So the objection is, well, the government's only in charge of 30,000 people dying. And I reject that. Hitler has been accused of killing 6 million people, but it took him 4 years. And in 4 years, and let's stipulate that that's true, and in 4 years, say 100,000 people would have died of natural causes. So is Hitler responsible for only 5.9 deaths, not 6 million? No, he's responsible for 6 million deaths. He killed 6 million people. So I reject this objection to my theory. Okay, and the next objection is, well, if private enterprise owned the roads, traffic would come to a halt, maybe not as bad as bumper to bumper, but it would come to a halt because every time you passed a collection device, you'd have to stop and put in a nickel or a dollar or whatever it is. Well, this objection is problematic. When I started writing this stuff and doing research on it, what I was doing is I was getting into groceries. Don't ask. Well, ask and I'll tell you. Why was I getting into groceries? Because at that time, I think it was the 1980s or somewhere in there, they were just bringing in stuff. Where's my rabbit? Here's my rabbit. I'm buying the rabbit, and the rabbit has got this little thing on the bottom of it, and you put it over a grid, and it goes beep, and now it registers. And what I was saying is what we should do. And nowadays, you go to any supermarket and that's what you do. You don't have to ring up anything. You just sort of put the thing over the glass reactor and it registers. And it not only registers how much it is, but it registers that this is one rabbit. And then they can buy more rabbits and stuff like that. So my idea was, well, just put something like that on the underbody of every car. And no longer do you have to stop and pay, but rather, and also there'd be a thing in the highway that would register the car going over the registrant, and then you'd be sent a bill at the end of the month or the end of the year, or you'd put money in, and then they would take the money out as you use the road vehicle. So the objection that you'd have to stop and pay is highly problematic. And so I would reject that objection. Another one is privacy. If the government knew that you were going here and there and you were going off to see your proctologist, and nobody wants anyone to know that they're going to see their proctologist, what about privacy? Well, on my road, I would ensure people that the only thing I want to know is how far you went, and I'm not going to be finding out whether you went to your proctologist or whatever. Another objection, and now I don't know if I need the screen, maybe not. I'm going to get out on the road, and guess what? Howard is the owner of this road, and Howard is a rotten kid. And you know what Howard says? He says, that'll be $1 million to get her on the road. Namely, you'd be trapped if there were private road owners. And now we're not talking about a highway, we're now talking about a city street. And Howard owns the road that is, my house is on his road. And he's going to charge me $1 million. Namely, he's going to trap me in my house. Or if I'm not in my house, he's going to charge me $1 million to get into my house every time I commute. And this would be a horrible thing. And this would be an objection to private roads. Well, the answer to that objection is, what's the answer to that objection? The answer to that objection is that Howard would be a maniac if he did that, because he'd lose profits and he'd go broke, because he wants to have people building houses on his road. He wants to have people building a mall, a shopping mall, or a factory, or the high-rise residential area, or something. He doesn't want an empty road. He's now talking about like city streets. He wants people to be moving back and forth. Well, how's he going to get people to move back and forth? He's going to have to contractually obligate himself not to do that. He's going to look, before I build my house on his road, I'm going to want to know, well, Howard, what's your shtick? What's your deal? What's your policy? And if your policy is you can charge me these outrageous amounts of money, I'm not putting my house there. So what Howard would have to do to attract customers there in the first place, he'd have to say, look, I'm not going to charge any occupant of any house here any more than I'll charge anyone else. Or for the next 10 years, I'm going to charge you this amount, or some contractual obligation on his part, which would preclude him from doing that. So that would be the answer to that objection. Another objection, and this one is a technical economic objection, is that roads are a natural monopoly. Don't have somehow for rabbits and pens and scissors you can have many companies doing it, but for roads it's a natural monopoly that only one person can own all the roads. Well, we have other long thin things beside roads where there was private ownership. Railroads. If there was something intrinsic about roads that they necessarily had to be run by one person, how could we have different people owning different railroads? Now, a lot of the railroads were either government subsidized or government owned. By the way, in New York City, the IRT and the BMT were originally railroads, city railroads, but subway. They were originally privately owned. Only the IND was government owned. And what happened was that the IRT, Interborough Rapid Transit, and BMT, Borough of Manhattan Transit, I forget the exact names, they were privately owned and they were charging a nickel per entry, and they were going to raise it to a dime. And the city government said, "Oh, this is unconscionable. You can't raise it to a dime. That's doubling." So they took it over. They nationalized the railroad or the subway. And guess what they did? they charged a dime. Go figure. I had a full head of hair before that happened. Look at me now. I pulled out all my hair over this nationalization. Okay. Now also in New York City, the FDR, that's the East Highway running up and down east side of Manhattan. They have one road over another, so you could do that. You could have competition that way. I mean, you want to go from. Let me get my drawing board again. Here we go. Where's my? Here it is. New whiteboard. You want to go from, let's say, where are we? Let's say this is Boston. Do a B for Boston. And you want to make a road to, I don't know, Seattle. And that's, I don't know, 3,000 miles. And you want to go as the crow flies. You want to have a straight road. And that would be the ideal, because if it varies off the straight and narrow, it costs more and the trip is longer. But you don't have to do it straight. You could do it a little bit variant like that. You could do it a little variant like that. You could do it a little variant like that. And if this distance, vertical distance, is only 15 miles, well, that's no big deal. So that's one way to have competition. Everyone with me? I hope my drawing doesn't screw up anyone's understanding. But what I'm trying to say is you don't need an exact crow flies to have competition. You could have a road that's 10 to 15 miles off of the straight and narrow. And you can also have one right above the other. Now, the problem with that is a thing called ad coelum. What's ad coelum? ADCOELUM, ad coelum. Ad coelum is the doctrine that if you own, say, a square mile of the Earth's surface, you then own a cone down to the core of the Earth, downward and upward into the heavens. That's the ad coelum doctrine. Well, the ad coelum doctrine would say that if I own a road, you can't build a road right on top of me because I own up. And you can't build a tunnel under me because I own down. Well, we libertarians reject the ad coelum doctrine because we libertarians think that what do we think? What we think is that you can only own stuff by homesteading. Well, nobody homesteaded stuff 25 miles down below the earth. So you can't own stuff 25 miles down below the earth. And then you can have slant drilling. You know, I drill under my house and then I go into your house. As long as I don't cave in your buildings, I can do that. So there's nothing wrong with building over or under. Now that I've got this diagram, this beautiful diagram, let me mention yet another objection. Do you need what's it called? Uh, Eminent domain. Do you need eminent domain to make roads? Because look, between Boston and Seattle, 3,000 miles, how many people own land between there? I don't know, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 people might own land. And then you get the holdout problem. Here's a guy who owns a square mile right here. And he says, sure, you can build a road right through my property, but that'll be $1 trillion, please. He's going to be a holdout. Or he says, look, I'm not selling. Grandma gave me this land, and this land is perfect the way it is, and I don't want a highway going right through it. And the hell with you. And now my favorite cartoon character is Cartman from South Park. And everyone knows what Cartman stands for. Cartman stands for screw you guys, screw you guys, screw you guys. Well, suppose Cartman owns all this land right here. He owns this land here. And we want to build a road from Boston to Seattle. And the only feasible way is Highway 1, Highway 2, Highway 3. That's Highway 3. This is Highway 4. The only feasible way are those four paths. Obviously, there'd be many more, but Cartman owns land all throughout all the options. And he says, "Screw you guys! I'm not allowing you to build a road." Well, then don't we need eminent domain? Don't we then need government to tell Cartman, look, Cartman, we're going to nationalize your land. We'll give you what we think is fair market value, and then we're putting a road right through your property, and you don't like it, too bad, go lump it. That would be eminent domain, or in Canada, they call it expropriation, I think. Well, the answer to that is you build a tunnel under Cartman's property, or you build a bridge over. And Cartman cannot use ad coelum doctrine to say, oh, well, you can't do it. Now, when my son, who is now age 46, when he was about 15, we discussed this very question for about a year, maybe a year and a half. And we discussed, well, what could Cartman do to stop us? And what we said is Cartman could put sticks down under his property and sticks upward, and therefore we couldn't build a bridge or a tunnel. And now we have to get into football theory. So I'm going to get out of this diagram and I'm going to get into football. So what's going on in football? Oh, I have only got 5 more minutes, so I guess I'll finish with the football. So here is a football, what do you call it? A football thing. And here's the end zone, and here is the end zone. And we want to move the ball in this direction because we're team A, and we want to go to team B's goal line. And I tell you that it's a lot easier to move the ball here than it is to move the ball here. And everyone understands why, because here at point 1, you have the whole football field to operate on. You can throw a pass, you can run, you can, I don't know, do all sorts of things. Whereas at the goal line, it's very hard to get there because you don't have much room to operate. All you have is the end zone over here. So how big is the football? The road football. The road football is, let's say, 3 lanes. Each lane is 10 feet wide. So that's 60 feet wide. And then a median of 40 feet. That's just 100 feet. So all the offense has to do is move a football 150 feet wide. How much does Cartman have to defend? He's got to defend 15 miles. I don't want to go back and draw the other diagram. It'll take me forever. Let me get out of this. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that Cartman doesn't have a chance. And then what happened to just continue the story with my son, I wrote it up just as a chapter, and it became a chapter in this book. And the question is my son my co-author or not? And he was only 16 or so. And he said, well, I wrote it all, but we discussed all this football stuff and ad column for a year and a half. And I finally decided to make him a co-author. And then he said, but no one would believe it. I'm just a kid. He was smart. And I said, well, I don't care whether people will believe it or not. I just care about the truth. And the truth is, you're my co-author. So then what happened is Gordon Tullock, who was a very famous economist who almost won a Nobel Prize, wrote a blistering attack on the block and block thesis. And I'm running out of time, so I can't really get into his critique. He just said we were out to lunch and we were crazy and unhinged. I don't think he used the word unhinged. And then I wrote a response. By then, my son was not that interested in libertarianism anymore. He became a nerd. So let me just summarize because I think I'm out of time. The main reason for privatizing roads is to save human lives. 40,000 people a year die. And the best way to do this is to privatize roads so that, let me read a quote from Thomas Sowell, one of my favorite economists. And here's the quote from him. And what he says is, it's hard to imagine a more stupid or a more dangerous way of making decisions than by putting those decisions in the hands of people who pay no price for being wrong. Well, the NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, is responsible for killing 40,000 people a year. I don't say they're murderers. I don't say we should kill them. I don't say we should have the death penalty to them. But they are responsible for the present system, which kills 40,000 people. And they don't pay any price for making the decisions to have a monopoly. And I regard that as highly problematic. Okay, I'll finish here. I could go on more. There's lots more in this book and lots more to say, but I wish I were at the conference so we could have had some good questions and answers, but I'll stop here.
So that was amazing. And so Dr. Block, since you were not able to attend with us, one of the things that we did is we had a panel discussion that kind of ended it out, and we were asking the hard questions of voluntarism. And so I thought I'd just kind of throw three at you just to get your take. How in a voluntarist world, in a stateless society, in a world without government, who would protect the environment?
Well, we'd have private courts and private police, and they would protect the environment. Look, suppose you're my neighbor, and I have garbage, and I have eggshells and orange peels and coffee grounds and cans of Coke, empty cans of Coke, and I take my garbage and I dump it on your front lawn. Now, if you're a nice guy, what you would do is you'd come to my wife and say, hey, Walter went berserk. Look what he did. And there's no question about what I did. You taped it, and I've got my fingerprints on the cans of Coke and all. Now, if you were not a nice guy, or if you tried this and it didn't work, you'd call the cops. And you'd say, look, this is trespass. Walter Block went berserk and he dumped his garbage on my front lawn. Get him to stop and give him a fine or put him in jail or something. Now, suppose instead of doing that, what I did is I burned my garbage. And now, instead of sending over macro garbage, eggshells, orange peels, coffee grinds, whatever, chicken bones, I burned them. And now I sent that stuff over in the form of little particles, dust particles, to your lawn and to your lungs. Any difference? No, the same thing. Murray Rothbard wrote a brilliant essay. I think it was in 1980, 82, something like that. And I forget the title, something about air pollution in the title. And what he said is that air pollution is not a market failure. Air pollution is a trespass. And just as if I went on your lawn and stood there and wouldn't get off, you would have repercussions in an anarchist society. You'd go to your defense agency and say, look, Walter, when he won't get off my lawn. I want to mow my lawn. I want to sit on my lawn and he's there. Get him off. You do the same thing with pollution. So who would protect against pollution? Who would defend property rights? Private defense agencies and private courts.
Excellent. Okay, another one. And so, in a voluntarist society, there wouldn't be any imaginary lines. And so, what would you do about unrestricted immigration? Would the area that we now call the country right now be subsumed with people from around the world that would be clogging up everything, or is there a better explanation?
Now, that's one of my canned speeches, like for the road. So I could answer this in an hour, but I think you want a 2-minute answer. This is a very divisive issue among libertarians. Murray Rothbard at one time favored open borders. And then at another time, he opposed open borders. Bumper Hornberger favors open borders. Hans Hoppe favors not closed borders, but limited borders. So this is a very contentious issue among libertarians. I have a solution, I'm happy to say. Suppose somebody comes from Mars, a person from Mars, and he lands in the middle of Alaska, in the middle of the Rocky Mountains in Wyoming, and he starts homesteading unhomesteaded land, virgin land that's never been touched by human beings. And he has a cow and he has some corn and he's doing his thing. And along comes somebody from ICE, the people in charge of immigration, and they say, cut this out. This is U.S. soil. Where'd you come from? He says Mars. And the question is, what do you call it? What libertarian law, what libertarian stricture did he violate? And the answer is none. He didn't violate anything. So he is a legitimate owner of that property because he's the first homesteader. And Murray Rothbard and Hans Hoppe and John Locke would all say he's the first homesteader. He need not be from Mars. He could be from Africa or Asia or from anywhere, but he's the rightful owner. And therefore, open borders. Now, the problem with open borders is that some people are murderers who come in. And other people, they see a woman in a miniskirt and they somehow think that, you can do anything you want with her because in their culture, you can't wear a miniskirt. We want to keep those people out. So how do we have our cake and eat it? How do we not violate libertarian stricture and keep ourselves safe? Or maybe there are a quadrillion Martians and they're all nice guys, and none of them will mess with a woman with a miniskirt or kill anyone. But we can't have a quadrillion people. There's too many people. How do we keep them out? And you'll never guess what the answer is. The answer is privatize every square inch of the country. Privatize the roads, privatize the fields, privatize the parks, privatize the bodies of water. And one of my books is privatizing oceans, rivers, and lakes. Now, if they come, they're trespassing. So the solution is open borders plus private property rights in everything. Now, one of the problems with that is there is such a thing as, what is it called? Submarginal land in the middle of Alaska that nobody wants because it doesn't pay to homestead that stuff quite yet. Well, we'd have to have charity or somebody, some defense agency would have to go and homestead that stuff at a cost and thus safeguard its clients. The problem that I have with the limited or restricted borders is they are they want to keep us safe, but they're jettisoning libertarian theory. And I don't like jettisoning libertarian theory. I want to keep libertarian theory and also have safety. And they are compromising with libertarian theory. So on this issue, Hans Hoppe and Murray Rothbard are not libertarian.
Excellent. Okay, final question for you. So, in a stateless society, how would we protect ourselves from other countries that have states and that have armies? How would national defense be addressed in a voluntarist world?
Well, there is this country on the Horn of Africa. I forget what the name of the country is. I'm so pathetic. What's the one that they say it's anarchy there?
Somalia,
Somalia, good old Somalia. Thank you. I'm getting senile. I can't
which is
remember.
technically an anocracy. It's not anarchy. It's different factions fighting over the same government. So it's not really anarchy, but go ahead.
Semi-anarchy. And if you compare them with Canada, uh, Somalia doesn't look that good. But if you compare Somalia with the other countries near there, they look pretty good. And if anyone tries to attack Somalia, the Somalian gangs or contending forces or whatever you want to call it will unite, presumably, and kick the butt out of Kenya if Kenya tries to invade Somalia. Another example is 1948 Israel. Uh, there was no really IDF at that time. There was the Lehigh, there was the Palmach, there was the Irgun. These were just private. The critics would call them gangs. I would call them private defense agencies, and yet they were able to kick the butt out of what, seven armies, seven invading Arab armies, and there was no IDF yet. Well, there was sort of an IDF, but for all intents and purposes, there were just these private defense agencies. So don't tell me that private defense agencies can never withstand armies. Now, look, if China invades Monaco, and Monaco or Liechtenstein is private, well, then China's going to win because they've got, I don't know, 1 billion people, and Monaco's got 100,000 people. But you have to have ceteris paribus. You have to assume equal-sized factions, and one is a government, and the other is not a government. Well, the non-government is going to be a lot richer. And there's this expression, what is it? Wealthier is healthier. Mm-hmm. Well, wealthier is safer. And if the U.S. was anarchist society and Russia and China ganged up on us, we'd probably kick their butt because we'd be 20 times richer than them. And if you're that much richer because we have free enterprise and they don't, they wouldn't dare attack us. So I think that anarchist systems don't have to be behindhand governments in terms of safety in war.
Perfect. Hey, thank you so much for your time and contributing to Liberty on the Rocks, Sedona 2024, the Voluntarism Conference. It's been a pleasure. Hi, this is Etienne de la Boissy from the Art of Liberty Foundation. If you liked this presentation from the 2024 Liberty on the Rocks Conference in Sedona, then you are going to love the Art of Liberty Foundation's upcoming book, Voluntarism: How the Only Ism, Fair for Everyone, leads to harmony, prosperity, and good karma for all. The book is in the same image and meme-rich format of Government, the Biggest Scam in History Exposed, featuring the executive summary of the executive summary to rapidly understand the important issues. If you or anyone you know has any doubt that the free market could provide all the legitimate, non-redistributive services provided by government better, faster, and cheaper without the waste, fraud, abuse, and extortion, then this is the book for you. You can pre-order a copy of the book through our $25,000 Indiegogo campaign to launch the book and get it into wide distribution at voluntarism-book.org.